I was raised on action movies. All my adventures were virtual. My name is Matt Vandyke.
Matthew! On the new Indiana Jones.
I was sort of sheltered and spoiled growing up. Here I was in my mid-20s. My mother and grandmother would do my grocery shopping. I had to do something drastic. You know, a crash course in manhood. I decided I'm gonna hit every single Arab country. I'm filming and photographing. Yeah! It was incredible. And then Libya happened.
A revolution is spreading across the Arab world.
Governments have fallen in Tunisia and Egypt. Will Libya be next?
The friends I made in Libya were better friends to me than almost all my friends in America.
You are in Libya now?
One of my friends said, "Why doesn't anybody help us?" I wanted to be shaping events around me and having an impact. And now here was the Arab Spring challenging my very image of what manhood was.
Baltimore resident Matthew Vandyke is armed and fighting with rebels in Libya.
I spent 5.5 months in 2 different prisons, and it absolutely transformed me. I had grown out of Matthew Vandyke. Everybody tries to create their idealized image of how they want to be seen and who they want to be.
Brooklyn's Marshall Curry is one of today's most preeminent and respected documentary filmmakers. Curry started off with a bang with 2005's Street Fight, which followed the volatile mayoral campaign between Newark's longtime incumbent, Sharp James, and his young, bold challenger, Cory Booker. Then there was 2009's Racing Dreams, which followed 3 precocious children, all with the aspirations of one day competing in NASCAR. Then 2011's If a Tree Falls, a story of the Earth Liberation Front, which followed the trajectory of the radical environmentalist Daniel McCowan. All 3 films were broadcast on POV and enjoyed wide distribution. Well, now Curry is back with a new film, perhaps his most unusual to date. It's called Point and Shoot, and the film, which won Best Documentary Feature at this year's Tribeca Film Festival, follows Matt Vandyke, a timid 26-year-old with obsessive-compulsive disorder who left home in Baltimore in 2006 and set off on a self-described crash course in manhood. Matt ended up befriending a band of Libyan revolutionaries and joined in their fight against dictator Muammar Gaddafi. With a gun in one hand and a camera in the other, Matt fought in and filmed the war until he was captured. That, plus Marshall's contemporary footage, make for another unforgettable story. Joining me now is 2-time Academy Award-nominated documentary filmmaker, Marshall Curry. Welcome, Marshall.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. Let's step back in time for just a moment. And if I remember correctly, the whole thing started when you got an email from Matt.
That's right, for Point and Shoot.
I
I didn't know his story, but I got an email one day out of the blue from a guy explaining that he had recently returned from Libya, where he'd been fighting with the rebels, and that he had footage of this and of the 3 years that preceded it, during which he'd gone on this incredible 35,000-mile motorcycle trip through northern Africa and the Middle East. And I explained to him at that point, you know, I only work on projects where I have full creative independence and control, and he said that was not a problem, and so came to New York, met with my wife, who's a producer on the film, and me, and just told us this story. And it's an unbelievable tale.
True.
But it also raises tons of questions. And after he left, we just couldn't stop talking about it. How do we define manhood? How do we become adults? Questions about war and violence and the way we use cameras. And so I thought this definitely should be a documentary.
So you put everything on hold and decided to shuffle your work load or something because it weren't.
Yep. So I was working on a couple other things at the
Yeah,
same time,
okay.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So I
we'll get into that on we'll have you back on to talk about other projects. But didn't you? But also, in addition to the actual Matt's actual story and all that implied, right? Like you say about manhood, about just everybody sort of being their own citizen journalists nowadays, and because we're all happen to have a phone on us, or. But also, you met with Matt. Did you get an idea of his peccadillos and also, of this guy as a compelling character as well?
Yeah.
Sort of that thread.
Yes, I mean when he first came, I was a little nervous about what kind of a guy he would be. I imagined that somebody who goes off and gets involved in a war in Libya is probably wants to be seen as a two-dimensional action hero. And so I was actually pleasantly surprised when he came to New York and started telling stories that were revealing of weaknesses and flaws and made him into a human. So he started explaining his obsessive compulsive disorder and how that had led to him going off on this adventure in the first place, and told stories about being in a Jeep in Libya and being bounced out and realizing that he'd left his gun in the Jeep, but he still kept his camera. And he said to me, I'd wanted to be over there as a fighter, but here I was in the middle of a battle, my gun's in the Jeep and I have my camera, so what am I? And a willingness to share those kinds of stories were what really attracted me and said, okay, there's a movie here. It's not just going to be like a hagiography of some awesome action hero.
Right. But he also Matt Vandyke also becomes in a way an avatar for for what we were talking about also, and what a little while ago in terms of somebody who anybody can now be a documentary filmmaker. We're using the term a little loosely, obviously, but anybody can go out now in the midst of some sort of crisis or wherever and tell a story. So, I mean, did you kind of figure that part of your story out? How did you do that, I guess?
That was also something that was interesting to me from the beginning.
Yeah.
Matt was shooting his story for years and had different ideas of what it was that he was making. I mean, in his early years, I think he thought he was making a kind of action reality TV show modeled after this Australian guy named Albie Mangles, who is a sort of early proto-reality TV show where he traveled around the world with a camera and captured his incredible adventures. I think over time, Matt's view of the camera began to change, and he began to see himself more as a fighter in the war than as a documenter of that. But throughout the film, we talk a lot, explore a lot these questions of how cameras affect ourselves. How when you're filming yourself, how self-conscious of that process are you? What are you trying to project to the camera? And I think probably 25 years ago, there were documentary filmmaker questions. What does a camera do to a room? What is it? How does it change the dynamics in the room? These were questions that documentary filmmakers asked themselves. But now that everybody has a cell phone camera and most people have Facebook, they've become ubiquitous questions. You go on vacation, and are you enjoying your vacation, or are you looking for photo ops of yourself enjoying your vacation that then you can post on Facebook so that people see you as somebody who enjoys your vacation?
I don't go on vacation. That's the problem. Well, first of all, the point and shoot. There's so much to talk about in so little time. But point and shoot, by the way, is still opening up wide around the country.
Right.
It was in New York. It had a very well received theatrical, and it will also shortly, I know, be on iTunes in February, available for digital platforms like iTunes.
So if people want to figure it out, they can go to the website, which is pointandshootfilm.com. Or our Facebook page as well, and that'll tell you the different cities. I think it'll be in about 100 cities over the course of December.
Right. But I did want to. I know that we only have a few minutes left, but I knew that there was one other thing about Matt appearing sometimes and not appearing, and that he's, you have to kind of manage that you have to kind of manage that relationship after the fact, because he's, even though obviously he was very supportive of the film and probably very excited when it came out, he still does, he's sort of a victim of his own worst enemy and sometimes, and he's a victim of his own compulsions, right? And so it makes it kind of difficult to navigate.
Well, I mean,
for you,
I think that there's probably never been a documentary film where the subject of the film watched it and said, that 85 minutes perfectly captures every aspect of my life. And so, I think he feels mixed about it, honestly. And like I mentioned, I had creative independence, and I gave him opportunities to watch the film, and I listened to his feedback. But there were places where we disagreed about things, and I did what I thought was best. Mm-hmm. So, as a result, I think he has come out and done a lot of Q&As, and he tweets about the film, and he does a lot of social media around the film. But there are things certainly that he would do differently if he had been directing it.
Right. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll definitely come back, and I want to hear more also about other projects you're working on.
Well, thank you. No, it's great to be here.
Okay, great.